All right, so we've had a lot of requests to like deep dive into this whole woke culture thing that's been going around about the Canadian Armed Forces,
Hmm.
and we've got some pretty interesting sources to look at.
Okay.
First up, we've got this piece by Brian Lilly in the Toronto Sun,
Right.
where he really doesn't hold back in criticizing the Trudeau government and their approach to the military.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, and then to get a sense of what people are actually saying about this.
Hmm.
We also pulled up this Reddit thread from our Canada,
Okay.
and it's actually gotten a ton of comments.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it seems like this is something that people are really, talking about and debating.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a hot button topic.
For sure.
I think what's interesting right off the bat is just how Lily uses this term woke.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's using it as like a weapon, you know?
Right.
He's not really trying to like address specific concerns or anything. It's more about just labeling and dismissing anything that like challenges traditional military norms.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely doesn't mince words.
No.
He straight up claims that the Trudeau government is prioritizing social experiments
Yeah.
over like actual military readiness.
Yeah.
And he uses some pretty loaded language, like he paints this picture of a military that's more focused on political correctness than on, actual combat effectiveness.
Right. And that's where I think it's really important to like look beyond the rhetoric and actually dive into like the specifics, like what are the actual, concerns here.
Exactly.
So, for example, Lily points to things like Canada sending gender advisors to Ukraine
Right.
as like evidence of this woke agenda,
Mm-hmm.
but he doesn't actually explain what these advisors like do or what
Yeah.
their objectives are or anything like that.
It's just like gender advisors, like that's supposed to be enough to set people off.
Exactly.
Right.
He also brings up the Navy's decision to drop their traditional march anthem.
Oh yeah, Heart of Oak, right?
Yeah, Heart of Oak, because of concerns about like gendered language.
Yeah.
So again, it's like he's highlighting these very specific examples, but without really providing a lot of context.
It seems like there's a pattern here.
Yeah,
It's like he's cherry picking these incidents
exactly.
to fit this, this narrative that he's trying to build.
Yeah, and with the gender advisors thing, instead of like presenting any evidence that these deployments are actually negatively impacting military readiness,
Right.
he just kind of implies that they're like a waste of resources.
Yeah.
He uses all these phrases like frivolous social experiments and stuff,
Mhm.
which are meant to, trigger like a gut reaction,
Right.
not like a reasoned analysis.
Yeah. He's appealing to this idea that like traditional masculinity and military strength,
Yes,
like those two things go hand in hand.
exactly.
And that anything that challenges that is like a threat.
Right. It plays into this fear that like the military is becoming soft or feminized, which then by extension means that it's becoming less effective.
Right. Right. Okay. So then we have this Reddit thread,
Yeah.
which is, it's basically like a battleground of opinions on this whole woke culture thing.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the commenters are pushing back against Lily's framing. They're calling it fear-mongering. And they're saying that there are like much bigger issues to worry about when it comes to the Canadian military.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating about the Reddit thread is that it really gives us a glimpse into like how diverse public opinion is on this.
For sure.
You have some people who are echoing Lily's concerns about like declining military readiness.
Right.
But then you have a lot of others who are expressing like frustration with what they see as like a manufactured crisis.
Yeah, I mean, some of the comments were pretty pointed.
Yeah, yeah.
Like one user wrote, the second you hear someone complaining about woke, you are dealing with an asshole. Right. And then another one said, I don't care if you have a dick, tits, both, or neither. As long as you are willing to shoot and get shot at to protect me, you're a hero in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, those comments really highlight just how polarizing this whole debate is.
Yeah.
The term woke itself has become so loaded that it's almost impossible to have like a nuanced conversation about the issues that it's supposed to represent.
It's like everybody's talking past each other,
Exactly. And this brings us to this a really critical point.
Okay.
Is this like obsession with woke culture actually preventing us from having like a productive conversation about the real challenges facing the Canadian Armed Forces?
Because, let's be honest, there are some serious issues that need to be addressed.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, Lilly himself even acknowledges that the military is currently short over 16,000 troops.
Wow.
So there's clearly like a recruitment and retention problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just because of woke culture.
Right. A lot of the comments on Reddit were pointing to much more concrete issues, like underfunding,
Mm.
low pay,
Yeah.
the incredibly long application process.
Right.
I mean, we're talking like close to a year in some cases.
It's crazy.
One commenter even said that new recruits are sometimes encouraged to seek housing in homeless shelters
What?
because of a lack of military housing.
Wow.
So if that's true,
Yeah.
that suggests that there are some like serious systemic problems that go way beyond this whole woke debate.
It's pretty shocking if that's actually happening.
Yeah, and I mean, these are problems that are impacting the lives of like real people, you know, who are serving their country.
Yeah, this whole discussion about gender advisors and dropping a traditional Navy song, it just feels like a distraction from the issues that are actually impacting the military's ability to function effectively.
I think that's a valid observation.
Yeah.
While those examples might be like symbolic of a broader cultural shift, you know, they don't really address the core issues of recruitment, retention, training, and resource allocation.
Okay, so let's talk a little more about those core issues.
Okay.
Because it seems like they're getting lost in all the noise about woke culture.
Right.
So Lily brings up conservative leader Pierre Poilievre,
Yeah.
who's pledged to eradicate the woke culture and bring back a warrior culture if he's elected.
So Poilievre's statement is interesting because it really taps into this idea that there's like a fundamental conflict
Okay.
between woke values and military effectiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So he's basically arguing that you can't have both.
But is that really true?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
can't you have a military that's both inclusive and effective?
All right.
Or is this whole woke versus warrior thing just like a false dichotomy?
That's the question we need to explore. Because if we're so focused on this like manufactured conflict,
Right.
we might miss opportunities to actually address the real challenges facing the Canadian Armed Forces.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because Poilievre, like, framing this whole thing assumes a very specific definition of what warrior culture even is. And that might not resonate with everyone, especially like younger generations who might be thinking about joining the military.
It's a good point. Like, what does warrior culture even mean in the 21st century?
Yeah.
Is it just about like physical strength and aggression? Or is there something more to it?
Well, I mean, Lily seems to suggest that warrior culture is about toughness, discipline, and like a single-minded focus on combat readiness.
Okay.
And he contrasts that with, you know, what he calls the woke culture, which he portrays as being overly concerned with political correctness, sensitivity, and social justice issues.
He even says that our soldiers will once again have a warrior culture, not a woke culture, when Poilievre is elected.
Yeah.
So it's like he's implying that these two things are mutually exclusive.
Exactly.
You know, you can't be both a warrior and woke.
And that's, I think, a really dangerous oversimplification.
Yeah.
Because it ignores the fact that, like, the modern battlefield
requires such a diverse set of skills and perspectives.
Right.
It's not just about brute force anymore.
Right.
It's about intelligence, adaptability, cultural sensitivity, the ability to work effectively in a team.
It's interesting you say that because some of the Reddit commenters were actually saying that, like, stereotypical warrior behavior might not actually be what makes a strong military force anymore.
Right.
One user even compared, like, the Russian VDV Corps,
oh, wow,
which is known for its hypermasculinity, to the so-called woke initiatives in the Canadian military.
Okay.
And they pointed out that the VDV got, like, decimated in Ukraine on the first day of the invasion.
Yeah, that's a really interesting comparison because it suggests that maybe this traditional image of the stoic, unemotional warrior might not be the most effective model in like today's complex and unpredictable world. Maybe empathy, critical thinking, the ability to connect with people from different cultures. Those things are just as important as physical strength and aggression.
Okay, so are we saying then that warrior culture is outdated? Is it actually holding the military back from adapting to these new challenges?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily outdated.
Okay.
But it certainly needs to evolve. You know, we need to like recognize that the concept of the warrior is more nuanced than just being tough and aggressive.
Right.
A true warrior is someone who is courageous, disciplined, skilled and adaptable.
Okay.
They're someone who can think critically,
Yeah.
solve problems, make decisions under pressure.
Right.
And they understand that strength comes not just from physical power, but also from mental resilience, emotional intelligence, and like a deep commitment to their comrades.
So maybe the real question isn't whether warrior culture is good or bad.
Right.
But rather like what kind of warrior culture we want to have.
Yes.
In the Canadian Armed Forces.
Yeah. Exactly. And that brings us back to this debate about woke culture.
Okay.
Is it truly incompatible with warrior culture? Or can the two coexist?
Right.
And even like complement each other?
Lily seems to think that like any focus on diversity and inclusion is inherently detrimental to military effectiveness. But is there any evidence to support that?
He doesn't really provide any concrete evidence. He just asserts that these initiatives are a distraction from the real business of the military, which he defines as like preparing for combat.
But what if those initiatives are actually essential for preparing for combat in the 21st century?
Right.
Like what if understanding different cases, being able to communicate effectively with people from diverse backgrounds, having a more inclusive and representative force, what if that actually makes the military more effective?
Those are all valid questions.
Yeah.
And they point to the need for like a more nuanced and evidence-based discussion about the role of diversity and inclusion in the military.
One of the Reddit commenters made a point that really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah.
They said, build proper housing for soldiers.
Yeah.
Pay them properly. Get them modern equipment they may actually be excited to use. It's easier to get someone to join the military when they aren't piloting the same thing their father was.
Yeah, that comment highlights a crucial point. Like, we need to focus on the practical realities of military life.
Right.
If we want to actually attract and retain qualified personnel.
Yeah.
It's not just about ideology or culture. It's about creating a work environment that's appealing, rewarding, and supportive.
Okay, so another commenter brought up an interesting point about the training backlog.
Oh, yeah.
They said that like the military didn't have the capacity to properly train the influx of new recruits during the last wave, even before the pandemic hit.
Wow.
So now there's a backlog.
Right.
And even with like increased recruitment, they can't process and train people quickly enough.
That's a really critical insight.
Yeah.
It suggests that attracting recruits is only part of the equation. We also need to have the resources and infrastructure in place to like properly train them and integrate them into the force.
It seems like this woke culture debate is kind of a red herring.
Yeah.
It's distracting us from the real issues facing the Canadian Armed Forces, like underfunding, staffing shortages, outdated equipment.
Yes.
And inadequate support for service members and their families.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
While there are legitimate concerns about the impact of social and cultural changes on the military, we need to be careful not to let those concerns overshadow the very real and pressing challenges that are actually impacting the military's ability to fulfill its mandate.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Like, how do we move beyond this woke versus warrior narrative and start having a more productive conversation about the future of the Canadian Armed Forces?
Well, I think the first step is to acknowledge that there's no easy answer.
Right.
This is a complex issue with multiple perspectives and competing priorities.
Yeah.
We need to be willing to listen to each other, consider different viewpoints, and engage in like respectful dialogue.
We also need to be careful not to let ourselves be manipulated by like politically charged rhetoric.
Yes, absolutely.
Terms like woke and warrior culture are often used to evoke emotional responses rather than promote thoughtful discussion.
Exactly.
And finally, we need to remember that the Canadian Armed Forces are made up of real people.
Yes.
Men and women who are putting their lives on the line to serve our country.
Right.
We owe it to them to have an honest and open conversation about the challenges they face and the best ways to support them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's easy to get like caught up in these, big picture debates and stuff. But we can't forget about like the actual people who are serving in the Canadian Armed Forces right now.
Yes.
Dealing with real challenges.
Exactly.
I mean, we're talking about people who are struggling to find housing to make ends meet on a military salary. facing these like crazy long wait times.
It's crazy.
Just to get processed and trained.
And these issues have been around for a while, you know?
Yeah.
It's not like woke culture just like suddenly appeared and caused all these problems.
Right.
The military has been dealing with underfunding,
Yeah.
staffing shortages, retention problems for years.
Right.
So this whole debate
Yeah.
feels like it's just diverting attention from those like systemic issues.
We've actually heard from a lot of listeners who feel the same way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like they feel like this woke versus warrior framing is a total distraction.
Right.
One person even emailed us to say, my partner's in the military and they're more worried about affording rent and getting the right gear than they are about pronouns or gender advisors.
Yeah, that comment really highlights the disconnect between the political rhetoric and the actual lived experiences of the people serving in the CAF.
For sure.
I mean, while politicians are busy arguing about these abstract concepts, you know, service members are dealing with like the concrete realities of military life, which can be incredibly stressful and demanding.
Okay, so Lily and Poilievre, they both seem to be banking on this idea that a return to a more traditional warrior culture will like solve the recruitment crisis.
Okay.
But is that really the answer?
Yeah.
What if instead of trying to like evoke some idealized past, we focused on making the military a more attractive career option in the present?
That's a really interesting thought. Like, imagine if the military offered competitive salaries, comprehensive benefits, affordable housing, clear pathways for career advancement. Like, imagine if it was seen as a workplace that valued its employees, respected their skills, provided opportunities for personal and professional growth. That might be a more effective recruitment strategy than simply trying to appeal to like a narrow sense of warrior identity.
It's almost like we're stuck in this time warp, you know, clinging to these outdated notions of what it means to be a soldier.
Right.
But the world has changed.
Exactly.
The nature of warfare has changed. And the people who are drawn to military service have changed.
And if the Canadian Armed Forces wants to attract the best and the brightest, they need to adapt to those changes. They need to offer something that appeals to a generation that values things like work-life balance, purpose-driven careers, opportunities to make a real difference.
And it's not about like softening the military or anything or getting rid of discipline and rigor. It's about recognizing that strength comes in many forms. We need soldiers who are physically fit and mentally tough. But we also need soldiers who are adaptable, innovative, and culturally sensitive.
Think about the range of skills that are required in the modern military now. Cybersecurity. Drone operation, intelligence analysis, diplomacy, humanitarian aid.
It's not just about combat anymore.
Exactly. These are not your stereotypical warrior roles, you know? But they're absolutely essential to the success of any military operation in the 21st century.
So maybe the solution isn't about eradicating woke culture, but about broadening our understanding of what constitutes military strength. It's about recognizing that diversity and inclusion are not weaknesses, but assets.
Exactly.
And it's about creating a military that reflects the values and aspirations of the society it serves.
That's a really powerful idea. Because ultimately, the strength of any military comes from the people who serve in it. And if we want to have a strong and effective Canadian Armed Forces, we need to invest in those people. Not just in their training and equipment, but in their well-being and their future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's leave our listeners with a few key takeaways. First, don't get swept up in the politically charged rhetoric. Terms like woke culture are often used to oversimplify complex issues and shut down meaningful debate. Second, remember that the Canadian Armed Forces are facing real challenges that go beyond this whole cultural debate.
Absolutely.
And finally, consider this. Could a focus on improving living conditions, offering competitive salaries, and fostering a culture of respect for all service members actually create a stronger and more effective military?
That's the question.
What do you think makes a strong and effective military force in the 21st century? We'll leave that for you to ponder. Until next time, keep diving deep.